Hello everyone, welcome to channel Qtomation. In previous session, we have learned about test cases template. We have also seen how to write the test cases. We have seen what is use case, what is test scenario, what is the difference between use case, test cases and test scenarios. We have also seen the test cases template as well and what information we have to put in test cases. So once you write the test cases, after that you will perform the test cases review. And once test cases review is done, the test cases will get approved by QA lead or QA manager. Once test cases are approved, next phase comes is test execution. So what exactly happens in test execution? Before test execution, we have to set up test environment as well. What is exactly test environment? In software testing, a test environment refers to the setup in which test cases are executed. Test environment need to be as same as the production environment because whatever web application we are going to test, eventually that will be deployed on production for end users. So whatever end users are going to use and whatever their setup is, our test environment also should be as same as that production setup. Because test setup, whatever is going to work on test setup, that behavior is going to happen on production setup as well. So that's why setting up the test environment is very crucial activity. And the test environment should be as same as the production environment on which the actual application is going to be used. So to test environment includes hardware, software, network configurations and other system dependencies that will mimic the production environment to ensure that testing outcomes are as accurate as possible. So as a QA team, before starting the test execution, we should set up the proper testing environment. That can be a hardware requirements, that can be a software requirement, that can be a network configurations and other system dependencies. That should mimic the production environment to ensure that the testing outcome is as accurate as possible. What comes under the hardware specifications? Hardware specifications can include CPU, memory RAM, disk space, number of servers or virtual machines. So in some organizations, we need different type of hardware specification machines. So practically sometimes it is not possible to have all the combinations of different type of hardware machines to be available physically. So in such cases, some organizations can use virtual machines as a test environment. So virtual machines are just same as physical machines, but all the configurations etc. they will mimic as same as the physical machines, but they would be easy to access. So from one machine you can actually access different type of virtual machines. So I'm not going to explain virtual machines in detail, but just understand on high level that nowadays there are provisions, there are different type of services which provides virtual machines. So virtual machines are which are the as having the same specifications as the hardware machines, but they can be operated from a single system. So we don't need actual hardware for those virtual machines. From the single system also, you can define what type of hardware configurations you need in any type of specific virtual machine, and we can configure different type of virtual machines with different type of specifications. So such Virtual machines are also used in test environment that provides the flexibility to use different type of combinations. For example, some virtual machines can have different memory allocation. Some can have more hard disk storage. So all these combinations of different type of specifications we can have on virtual machines as well. Different type of device types like mobile, web application. So for mobile application, what is the test environment we need? So for mobile application, we need different type of mobile devices with different operating system like iPhone, Android, desktop, etc. So this comes under the hardware specifications. Along with the hardware, we also need a software specifications as well. So some softwares or tools might be needed as a test environment. For example, operating system. So whatever client is going to use, it can be a Windows, Mac OS, Linux version, etc. of operating systems. So we should have the same operating system as a test environment while testing. So if there is an application which is specifically developed for Mac OS, then we should also test that application in our test environment as same as Mac operating system. Then only we would be able to test that application correctly. If there is an application which is going to be used on different operating system like Windows, Mac as well as Linux, in such scenarios we should also test such application on all the three type of test environment like Windows, Mac OS and Linux. Different type of database also needed as a test environment. For example, MySQL, Oracle, SQL Server, MongoDB, etc. So these are the different type of database which are required for the web applications. So whatever client is going to use, we should also set up the same test database in our test environment. Application server like Apache, Tomcat, Nginx, etc. So these are different type of software requirements. And apart from hardware and software, there are some other factors as well. For example, network speed, different type of user roles with varying permissions, example admin user, guest user, integration with third party APIs or services like payment gateways, external messaging services like WhatsApp, etc. So if suppose you have any web application which you are going to test which is related to e-commerce domain. So for e-commerce domain related application, there would be a products. Those product will have cart add to cart functionality. Also, they will have to do some payment as well. So for such payment, we need payment gateway integration. So depending on what is the application, what are the different integrations clients are going to use, so depending on those behavior and those tools, we should also create the same test environment with all the test integration which are going to be used. So this is basically about setting up the test environment. So once you set up the test environment, next step is test execution. So next step is test execution. So once the test environment is ready, test data is also ready, test cases are reviewed and test cases are also approved. Then we have to deploy the build on QA environment. So in some company, normally developers will deploy that specific build on QA environment. And this is again also very important activity. The build which is going to be tested, that should be deployed properly on the correct test environment. Once it is deployed on correct QA environment, then as a QA, we should first do smoke testing. So we have already seen what is smoke testing. So once developer deploys the QA build on test environment as a testing team, we should first do a smoke testing. We should always first do the smoke testing. We should check whether that build is stable or not, whether the feature or the functionality which is provided by developers, that basic functionality is working or not. If that basic thing is not working, then smoke testing is failed. and once the smoke testing is failed, we should not accept that build. We should not accept that build and we should reject that build. We should again give that build to developers and ask them to fix that, and once they fix it, then only we should again do the smoke testing, and after the smoke testing gets passed, we should start with detailed test execution. So this is also very important activity. We should always remember that whenever you are getting a new build, always perform smoke testing first. Just check that basic functionality of new feature is working or not, whether that build is stable or not, and once it is passed, then only start with detailed test case execution. So once you start with detailed test execution, how you should proceed? So if you remember in our last session, we have created the test cases. While creating the test cases, we have written all the test cases. For all the test cases, we have also given the priority. If you remember, P0 priority, P1 priority, P2 priority. So whenever you start the test execution, always start with P0 test cases first. P0 means highest priority. So if P0 test cases are working fine, then we should start with P1 test cases. Once P1 test cases are working fine, then we should execute the P2 test cases. So we should start with P0, that is highest priority test cases. Why we should do that? Because when you are executing the P0 test cases first, it will help you to identify the major issues in that build very early. So once you identify the major issues very early, you should inform the developer immediately. So they will fix those P0 issues, because if you don't execute P0 cases at start, what will happen? So P0 test cases, if you execute some of the P0 test cases in later stages, and if you find out that there is an issue, then P0 issue would be a blocker issue. So that would be a problematic, right? So that would delay the timeline, because major issue should be fixed as immediate as possible. That's why as a tester, we should always start the test execution with P0 test cases. Then we should go with P1 test cases, and then we can do the P2 test cases. So we should always perform the test execution in highest priority order. And whenever you are doing the test execution, we should always mark the test cases status. If the test cases actual behavior is as same as expected behavior, then mark that test case as pass. If the expected behavior and actual behavior are not matching, then mark that test case is fail. And if because of some failed test case, if you are not able to execute some of the test cases, then we should mark those test cases as block test cases. So we can mark it as pass, fail and block. So these are the three main status of test cases. So whenever any test cases you mark it as a fail, at the same time you should always log the issue for that failed test case. So you should immediately create the issue in bug tracking tool. You can create that issue in bug tracking tool, whichever is going to be used in your company. So you can write all the bug related information, you can log that issue and you can report it, assign it to the developer. And once you assign that issue to developer will fix that issue. After fixing, they will ask the QA team to retest it. So as a tester, whenever developer marks any issue as a fix, we should perform the retesting on that issue to verify whether it is actually fixed, or if it is not fixed, then you should reopen that issue and again assign back to the developer. So developer will again fix it and you will again retest it, and this time if that is fixed, then you will mark that issue as closed, verified and closed. So in the similar fashion, you will perform all the P0 cases, all the P1 cases, all the P2 test cases. You will log the issues for failed test cases, etc. You will perform the retesting on the fixed issues, and then again after that, so in round 1, if there are some issues which you have logged for the failed test cases, in round 2, after retesting, you will mark those test cases as pass. If that issue is fixed, then you will mark those test cases which are initially marked as a fail in the round 1, those will get passed in round 2. But you should mark that status as well. And once all the P0 and P1 issues are fixed and there are no other major issues open, then we can send the test cases execution report. So it is very important that all the P0 and P1 issues should be fixed. P0 and P1 issues should be fixed and there should not be any major issues which are in open state. Once that is done, then we can send the test cases execution report. And all the defect tracking should be properly done. So we should not miss any defect. We should execute the test cases, we should log the defects, we should retest those issues whichever gets fixed, and we should always track all the defects. And before closing the testing, we should verify that there are no P0 and P1 issues are in open state. So this is the high level flow of test execution. So you should always remember this point while executing the test cases. Some more points to remember for test cases execution. Verify that the test environment matches the specifications. For example, hardware, software, network, and it is stable before starting the test execution. So this is again very important activity. So whenever you are going to start the test execution, verify that the test environment is properly up and running. Build is also properly deployed. Correct build is deployed on QA environment, because if development team deploys the build on some other QA setup and you start execution on some different setup, then it will be problem, because you should always do the testing on correct QA environment on which the developer has deployed the QA build. So before actual starting the test execution, always double confirm or double verify that the build is deployed on the correct QA environment. And also remember that if there are some new features which are kind of a complex feature, or that can be a large number of features, so all the features sometimes developer don't deploy at once. They will develop it partially, they will build some features and they will deploy those features for testing. So multiple cycle might happen if feature are complex or more. So you will get a different build. So you will first get the QA build 1, after that they will provide you the QA build 2, then after fixing some of the issues they will again provide a new QA build to test. So there will be multiple cycle might happen if features are more or complex. And whenever you find there are environment related issues, we should communicate them promptly and resolve them before proceeding. As a QA, we should always maintain effective communication with development teams, product managers, and other stakeholders during test execution. So whenever you are doing the test execution, there might be some situation or there might be some behavior of some specific test cases which you might have not considered while writing the test cases. So in runtime, you will observe some behavior that you might not have confirmation whether it is expected behavior or it is not expected behavior. So you should always ask that to product person. You should ask that the person, you should ask such queries to person who have created the requirements. You should always clarify such queries with product person, product manager, and other stakeholders during the test execution. As a tester, never assume anything. Don't assume about the behavior which you are not confirmed. Always get confirmation from product team or other stakeholders who have written the requirements. And depending on that, you have to decide whether it's an issue or if it's an expected behavior. During the test execution, if you find some critical issues, for example, if you find login is not working, or if you find some important feature is not working, then you should immediately raise that issue to developers. Because if there are critical issues, those issues need to be fixed on priority. Without fixing that issues, you should not proceed the testing, because if there is already a blocker issue, you will not be able to do the correct testing. So that's why raise and discuss the critical issues as soon as they are detected. And application should work properly on QA environment and not just on dev environment. So sometimes what happens, developer will test the code on their local system, and some behavior of the application might work on their dev machines. But whenever you are doing the testing, you should always do the testing on QA environment, because QA environment is the one which is going to be same as the production environment. So there would be a different hardware and software combinations which might be different on dev machines. So if something is not working correctly on QA environment, you should immediately raise it to the developers and you should get those issues fixed, because if it's working on dev machine but not working on QA environment, then it will not also work on production environment. So you should, in that case, you should get those issues fixed on QA environment as well. So sometimes you log some issues and developer might say that that behavior is happening correctly on dev machine, but it is not happening correctly on QA machine or QA environment. So you should not accept that issue. Ideally, everything should work correctly on QA environment as well, and not just on development environment. During the test execution, always document the results of each test cases. So whenever you are going to perform the test execution, after test execution, always write the test cases status. Whether it is a pass, it is fail, or it might be blocked, or it might be in progress. So never miss to write the status of the test cases while execution. Always ensure that the test logs and screenshots are properly recorded for future reference. Also, during the test cases execution, you will perform some behavior or some test cases which might not be written in the test cases at first place. So, whenever you perform such actions at runtime also, you can note down those test cases and the behavior which you see for those test cases. So that might happen because while writing the test cases, sometimes some test cases also gets missed, and during runtime or during actual test execution we perform those actions. So we should note down those test cases in the sheet as well. Exit criteria check. So once you report all the issues gets fixed and you complete all the test cases execution, and now the time to close the test execution, we should ensure that all the exit criteria are met. For example, all the critical test cases are executed, there are no P0 and P1 issues are open, etc. And then you will generate a proper test report. That test report will have all the information like QA round 1 test execution status, all the status of different test cases, all the noted defects, and the results. And then you will share that test report. Always remember to get the required sign off from all the stakeholders confirming that the testing objectives have been met. For example, you can get the production sign off from, you can get the UAT sign off from product people once they complete the UAT, etc. So these are some points about test cases execution. So thank you for watching this video. In coming session, we will see some more topic about